Traditional versus Online Education by Zachary Williams. There are many different comparisons that can be done between traditional and online learning models. As far as similarities go, the education is meant to be valuable and informative either way that you go about it. Students should feel as though the time that they're spending, whether being in an in-class scenario or being online, should be meaningful, should relate to their personal lives, and should make them feel like it's not wasted time. As well, classes are always intended to keep the student engaged and to keep them focused on the content at hand. And of course, there are varieties of different materials that are going to be presented, some similar and some different between traditional and online models. But with differences, it primarily focuses around how the delivery method of the material is different. In a traditional setting, it's of course going to be in person, with more labs and personal activities and direct communication between students and the teacher, whereas online you're going to have maybe online discussions, more paper-based work, research-based work, videos and presentations, stuff of that nature. Of course, you're going to have interaction between classmates and students, but it is done differently with in-class discussions, being able to do group work and have in-person teacher discussions, whereas online you would maybe message your teacher, or you'd have to do things like discussion posts in order to coordinate or to compare ideas with other students. Of course, time flexibility is also a big one for most people, as traditional classes are going to be at set times, at set schedules, certain days of the week, whereas online students are able to tackle their assignments and do their learning when it best suits them around their personal life situation. Traditional education has a good connection between students and the teacher, being able to have a close connection as you are in class together. And it's usually easier for students to be able to get help from their teacher in these cases. All of your deadlines are usually pretty straightforward and clear, whether it be due in the same class session that you're currently in, or due at the end of the week, or something of that nature. Of course, being in person, things do apply a little bit more pressure to you, which is usually good in helping students to acquire information efficiently, and being in an in-class setting with these time constraints can be useful for that. You're going to have direct social interactions between classmates, which is going to allow you to share those ideas and build off of each other. Group assignments, which can help spread out some of the labor when it comes to larger assignments, and of course kinesthetic learning opportunities where there are labs and activities that students are going to be able to have in their hands and do in person. The cons of this, though, are that there is quite a lack of flexibility, as class times are very much set in stone, and you don't really have much other options you can do other than doing that class when that class is available. This can sometimes mean you have a limited access to particular courses or programs due to the time constraints of when those courses are available. As well, thanks to travel expenses, or potentially like living on a campus, if it's a university, where you would have to spend then more money in order to go to or attend those classes, or travel to those classes, which makes it a little bit more difficult. And when working in a traditional setting, it's a little bit more clear sometimes to see learners that have different degrees of knowledge as they enter the course, which can sometimes require more personalized learning methods in order to help make up for those deficits. For online education, there are a variety of online platforms and multimedia resources, videos, presentation types, and various informational resources that can be used to aid students in their education. You still have access to communication with the teacher and through other students through messages or through discussion posts, to still give you that aspect in the classroom as well. But you can always access your educational content when it suits you, based off of what you have going on in your life at that time. You still have clear deadlines, usually at the end of a week for online courses. You don't have to worry about the travel expenses or living situations, which usually reduces the cost. As well, it's a very adaptable based off of the content that's being delivered. However, some of the negatives are that teachers do need to be properly trained in order to teach online courses and how to better run them. It's oftentimes a little bit more difficult to communicate with staff and other faculty members, as you might not be in the same time zone, which can affect when you can actually call or be able to communicate to those people with messages. There's also oftentimes the biggest issue, the digital divide, as usually more elderly individuals have a harder time manipulating technology, and so you may also need to require some courses or some tutorials in order to help bridge that gap for them. As far as comparing different learning models with different learning theories, there are several different applications here. With traditional education and online education both, much of the content should be related to what is important to the student, as well as trying to allow them to deal with problem-solving scenarios, as this keeps the content meaningful and relevant to them, keeps them interested, and it helps keep them engaged in many of these cases. You, of course, also want to have plenty of communication between students, teachers, and then other students among the classroom so that they can collectively build and communicate together. They can further develop their understandings as a group, and they can even help work through changing each other's perspectives on different matters and helping them to understand things better, thanks to constructivism and then just reflection of self as they build their knowledge throughout a course. Of course, traditional education has the benefits of labs and experiments, which allows them to have that experiential learning as well, where they can kind of just have everything in hand and they can test things and manipulate things at will. With online education, however, the goal is to try to make things a bit more broad to allow more of interpretation of the assignment by the student. This allows them to try to focus on still learning the content, but being able to do it in a way that is most interesting to them. It allows them to pick what they want to do, which is much more self-directed. They're able to research their own interests, which will keep them more engaged and more focused, and find that the information is more enjoyable while still developing their own perceptions and understanding of the content being presented to them. Online discussions are still going to allow for that connective nature between students and each other, as well as with the teacher, in order to reflect better on concepts and to develop a broader understanding. Of course, most of the motivation involved with online students comes from self, which is just developed especially as students move into adulthood. They'll develop their own level of self-discipline, and they use their personal interests to help motivate them into completing their coursework. As well, having a well-balanced education and personal life is extremely useful here. Balancing load versus power is essential in order to have an effective education while also still maintaining all of your personal endeavors between it be family, work, and so on. When it comes to presenting information, traditional and online, of course, have similarities, but of course, glaring differences. Traditional has to do things about considering the load of the students. They usually have a more limited class time frame in which they must get their work done, whereas online is going to be a little bit different, where they have all their assignment access potentially for like an entire week, which allows them to then work on it at their leisure across that week. Traditional also has to work at focusing on student engagement, keeping them interested in the content in real time, and has to utilize active learning in order to keep them engaged. Whereas with online, it's much more self-guided and flexible, which is going to allow them to pick out their interests, research their interests, and they're given a much more broader range of topics to allow them to find their interests when covering content. Teacher feedback is, of course, essential in both cases, but it's a little bit more difficult in online. You need that teacher feedback, especially in online, to help make sure that the students understand whether or not they are doing the work appropriately, and to help let them know of any shortcomings in their assignments so that they can improve their work in the future. And of course, collecting student feedback and then applying that feedback to an online course is essential so that they can make the online class better, more adaptable, and overall better for the online student and for their accessibility. And here are my references. Thank you very much.